Hi, welcome back to the Distressed Princess. Today we're going to be counting down my top 7 Dollar Tree DIYs. DIY number 7. And this is one of my very first videos, and so it will always hold a soft spot in my heart. I'm using the Dollar Tree decorative blocks to make a farmhouse stack of books. I began by removing everything off of the decorative blocks. And then I painted all of them with white chalk paint. And I didn't worry about sanding the glitter off of this one because this little fake book is going to go in the center of the pile, so it's not going to show anyway. And then I used 60 grit sandpaper to distress around all the edges and corners, and these blocks distress beautifully. And then I hot glued all of the boxes in one stacked pile. The next step is to print out whatever words that you want to use on your fake books. Of course, you could use vinyl, but I was trying to not have to use a Cricut for this project. But using your printer, just print out the words that you want to use, and we're going to use a transfer method that is so easy to do. I just blacken the back of the words with, you can use a pencil, but I was using a black colored pencil. Then position your words on the end of your book and trace over them with a regular ink pen or a pencil, whatever you have handy. And you'll have a faint transfer of your words that you can now go back over using whatever marker you prefer. And in this case, I was using a fine tip Sharpie. Then wrap the books up with some jute string and tie a knot on the top. And the last step is to hot glue some flowers or greenery on the top of your book stack. And this was a greenery flower pick that I got at Joann Fabric. DIY number 6. In this one, I used one of the wooden plaques from the Dollar Tree and the metal welcome sign that you get at the Dollar Tree that comes in seasonal packets. I know there was one in the fall packet that comes with a couple other metal words, and I believe there was one for spring too. And it starts with the same thing that most great DIYs do, white chalk paint. I did a couple of coats of white chalk paint on the front and the back, and I sanded it down. Then I was positioning the welcome sign in the center to try to get an idea of where I want my grain sack stripes to go. Yes, this is going to have grain sack stripes. And ordinarily I would use masking tape to tape off my stripes, but I was out of masking tape at the time, and you couldn't really go out to the stores at the time that I made this video, so I had to use Scotch tape. And we learned a lesson here because Scotch tape works just fine when you're trying to make grain sack stripes. And I had to mix up my own blue paint too because I didn't have the exact color that I was wanting already. So I remember exactly what I used. It was English navy mixed with white. Once I had my thin lines painted on, I removed the tape, which is always my favorite part of making stripes, is removing the tape to see your crisp, clean lines. And see what I mean? If you do not have any painter's tape or masking tape, Scotch tape will work. Make sure that your first set of lines is completely dry before you go on to your next set, because your tape is going to go right over the top of the lines that you just made. So make sure they're dry so that they don't come back up. And remove the second set of tapes to reveal your grain sack stripes. And the last step is to use glue to attach your metal sign to your wooden sign, and I recommend E6000 and hot glue for the immediate hold. DIY number 5. This DIY is so easy and has such an impact. That's why it's one of my favorites on this list. It's just a styrofoam ball and white hydrangeas from the Dollar Tree and some ribbon from the Dollar Tree. And all there is to it is plucking the petals off of the hydrangea bushes and hot gluing them all over the styrofoam ball. Then just cut a piece of ribbon the size you would like your loop to be, and I hot glued it in place, and I also stapled it in place just to make sure it was secure. Then continue hot gluing your petals all around the ribbon and filling in any bald spots that there might be. And that was it for this really pretty hydrangea ball. DIY number 4. So here I'm showing off some stamps that I found on clearance at Hobby Lobby. It was the first set of stamps that I had ever bought in my life. I've never stamped anything before, but it sounded interesting and fun, and boy am I glad that I found these clearance stamps. These bendy flexible stamps are meant to go on an acrylic block, but I didn't have one at the time. Well, to be honest, I still don't. And besides that, I wanted it to be able to bend so that it could conform to this Dollar Tree candle. I'm using the black Stays-On ink that I got at Hobby Lobby. I used my Dollar Tree razor blade to scrape off the label, but the label left behind a lot of sticky residue, so I used Goo Gone to get rid of all of that and wiped the candle clean with a dish rag before I began to paint. I used one thin coat of chalk paint, and then I went back and distressed it with this gray color chalk paint that came from Michael's. I used 2 cereal bowls to stop my candle from rolling around while I was doing my stamping. And this was, in fact, the very first time I stamped anything. And so, I didn't know the rights and the wrongs. But I still stick to rubbing the stamp ink pad onto the stamp as opposed to dipping or pushing the stamp down into the ink pad, because when I push my stamp down into the ink pad, I get too much ink. So I like to rub the ink pad onto the stamp. Does that make sense? And so then I carefully just placed the stamp onto the candle and gave firm pressure for a little bit and lifted it up and saw my very first stamped item and fell in love. I decorated my candle with jute string, a few times wrapped around the top and knotted at the back, and topped it off with a couple teeny tiny sprigs of boxwood. And this was a Dollar Tree craft worthy of giving away as a gift. DIY number 3. As we all know, Dollar Tree is always carrying these long signs, and for different seasons usually, and I used the Easter one for this one. I removed the poor bunny's feet and eyes and his little raffia bow tie, and I'll wind up covering the back of this tore up part with brown craft paper so you have a nice finished backing. And I'm going to use a new tool, or it was new when I made this video, and you're going to be amazed. First, I painted the back side that is now the front side of the Easter sign. And this is the tool I was speaking of, the wood graining tool. And it is so much fun to use. You can turn anything into a wood grain look. Now this is wet paint that I'm using on this sign. It's still wet, it's not dried at all. And the secret is to take this tool and drag across and kind of rock it back and forth, and you get a wood grain effect. Oh my gosh, the possibilities, guys. Everything that we can do with this tool. And imagine the different colors that you can layer. I didn't even put a first layer on this sign. This is just the original MDF board showing through, and it's beautiful on its own. It makes it look like a weathered gray board. But you could do this in all kinds of colors if you wanted the brown tones to your wood grain. So many options. I was so excited about getting to try out my new tool. I totally forgot about the holes that come with these boards where the hangers, the jute string hangers are. So I went back and filled that with caulk, Dollar Tree caulk, by the way. And yeah, you could probably do that first. Then I made life really simple for myself and used this wall decal that is from the Dollar Tree to decorate my board. No vinyl cutter required. And as I mentioned earlier, I covered up the tore up back side of the sign with some brown craft paper from the Dollar Tree. This one made the list because of the ease of construction and how cool that wood graining tool is. DIY number 2, the golden basket. How I love all the shapes and sizes of the golden baskets at the Dollar Tree. And I'm going to use the metal piece off of that decorative block sign. This was an experimental method where I painted the basket using my fingers, and I used black chalk paint to do my painting. But anyway, trying to get in between in those little places and bins with my fingers because I saw it done on a staircase, the spindles on a staircase. Anyway, yeah, you don't have to do it this way. You can definitely use a paintbrush or foam brush, whatever your preference is. But I will say it did give kind of a neat effect that it was kind of cakier in places and not, so it kind of looked rusty and old. I was so excited once I finally found a couple of these decorative blocks with the little metal file folder pieces on the fronts of them at my Dollar Tree, because my Dollar Trees don't always carry the best stuff, but this was a good one. This was exciting when they came out with these. I used a piece of trash cardboard that came off of a super glue package to make a backing for my metal sign, and I'm also going to use this contact paper from the Dollar Tree to cover it. So this is the super glue fix all adhesive that you get at the Dollar Tree, and I used that to attach the little fake wooden piece to this little metal piece, and you only go around the 3 sides, leaving the top side open. And then to attach the metal piece to the metal basket, I use JB Weld, Minute Weld epoxy, something like that. JB Weld Minute. Because it is the strongest hold. It's the best thing I have found to attach anything metal to metal or glass to metal, anything metal. It occurs to me now that I'm looking back at this video that I could have used the holes that are already in the little file piece, and that could have been tied on with a piece of juice string. This once golden basket sits proudly in my kitchen. I love looking at it every day. And if you ever want to, you can slide a piece of cardstock with whatever word down inside and change it up a bit. And my number 1 DIY is the bird feeder. This was in a mystery box hop. I received all of these items in a mystery box. I needed to put them together for a craft, and I was really proud of myself for what I came up with. This bird feeder is still hanging in my backyard. The birds love it, and it really isn't as complicated to put together as it may seem. We will walk ourselves right through it. First, I needed to prepare all the pieces, so that meant taking the label off of the plastic jar, removing the hanger from the metal sign, as well as the little house, which I set aside for later because it might appear in another DIY. And of course, the barcode sticker got removed too. Then I had to prepare the little box. All we needed was the square piece, so I used a box cutter to cut the half moon piece off. I guess really this part would be optional. I painted the inside and outside of this box, but to tell you the truth, I kind of like the design that's inside of it. The green color didn't bother me at all, but since I did paint it, I went ahead and sealed it with dishwasher safe Mod Podge. The plastic jar is what is going to hold the bird seed, and it needs to be able to flow through the top and out the bottom, so I had to cut the bottom off of the plastic jar, which was really easy to cut with a box cutter. Then it's time to attach the lid to the metal roof piece, and I used E6000 for the permanent hold and hot glue for the immediate hold. Then get out your drill a hole in the center of the roof and the lid, 2 holes on opposite sides at the cut end of the plastic jar, and 2 holes in the bottom of the box. Then you'll need one of the chain plant hangers that you get at the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to remove 2 of the chains off of the hook. And I did this with wire cutters, but if you have pliers, whatever tool to bend that hook and get 2 of the chains off, and then bend the hook back so that your remaining chain stays in place. Then remove the clip part of the chain off the end. You don't need that. And then the very last link in the chain, we're going to bend it out straight like a pin. Then the pin part goes through the top of the roof, through the hole that you drilled, and through the bottom. And it's going to be secured into place using one of the wooden beads. And it was the medium-sized bead. It wasn't the smallest one, and it wasn't the largest one. Now, the end of the straightened link has actually 2 separate pieces, and you bend each of those pieces off to the sides around the wood bead, and that secures everything very well. Then you need to remove 2 links off of one of the chains that you've set aside. And 1 link goes on each of the drilled holes in the jar, just like this. Then, using the black wire that you get at the Dollar Tree, you're going to cut 2 pieces, 6 to 8 inches long each one, and you're going to thread it through the links in the jar. And then you're going to twist them up around each other. And this is how the jar attaches to the bottom wooden piece. Just thread your wires through the holes that you drilled, and then turn it over and twist those wires together. Then your bird feeder is ready to fill with seed, and you just pour the seed in the jar and screw the lid and the roof back on. And this is my #1 DIY because it brings me so much joy to go outside and watch these birds eating out of this feeder that I made just from Dollar Tree items. Thanks for watching my top 7 countdown. These are my favorite DIYs so far in my YouTube journey. I also want to thank you all for subscribing and watching my videos. I love you all, and I'll see you next time. Bye.